Hi, I'm an autistic storyteller, not just because I'm autistic myself, but the stories I tell are of autistic thought, feeling and experience. In the 6 years and getting close to 200 videos I've got up on this channel, I've told lots of stories, but one I've never told properly is of how I got my original autism diagnosis back in the 1980s. I'm Quinn, and this is Autismatic. And today, I'll explain how and why I found out that I'm autistic. Most people my age with an autism diagnosis got it in the last 15 years or so. That's not an opinion, just a statistic. The average age of autism diagnosis has gone up, even as younger and younger kids get diagnosed, because so many adults, especially middle-aged and older folks, have come forward seeking diagnosis. I didn't have to wait until adulthood, though, and this is how it happened. In 1975, I started infant school, mid-term thanks to an administrative mix-up. Preschool me was quiet and studious, always had my head buried in a book or a tub of Lego, even at 4 years old. My parents thought little of my peculiarities because my mum shared many of them, but when I started school they suddenly became cause for concern. Mum was quite proud that I'd learned to read before starting school, but that turned out to be a black mark against me in the classroom. Any head start I might have over other pupils was clearly a big problem to my teacher, so efforts were made to neutralise it. In my first infant school class at the tender age of not quite 5, I was placed on what the other pupils thought of as the naughty table, with a couple of boys who'd already been singled out as troublemakers. They'd helped to slow me down whilst the others caught up. Ironically, years later I discovered that one of those other naughty boys went on to be an award-winning composer. Funny that, eh? To say my primary school years were uneventful would be an outright lie, but it was nothing compared to what awaited me in secondary school. In 1981, aged 10, I sat the 11 plus exams along with most of my local schoolmates. They were a bit like those online IQ tests you see in clickbait ads these days, just pages and pages of them. Those of us who passed were sent to grammar schools and were expected to go on to university and professional careers. The rest went to secondary modern schools and had lower expectations placed on them. It was a horrible system, and I can't believe that some people are trying to revive it. Before the results even officially came out, my parents were already fielding offers of scholarships to fancy private schools. One of them was even within walking distance of my home. The phrase Oxbridge potential kept popping up, even at that age. That's like saying Ivy League potential in the US at age like 10 or 11. I didn't like it one bit, and I wanted to run away. If that doesn't make sense to you, then watch the video on PDA I did a couple of years ago. I'll link it up there, about how I experienced PDA, and that might make more sense. My dad was over the moon at the scholarship offers and gleefully dreamed of all the doors my attendance at a posh school might open for him. So my decision not to take any of those offers up didn't go down well. It took me 40 years to heal that wound. So why did I choose a state-run grammar school over a fancy scholarship? I didn't like the private school's uniform. They played way too much sport, and they had school on a Saturday morning, and no way was I going to give up Saturdays for school. So it was to be that instead of getting spat at and ridiculed by posh boys for being the token poor, I got spat on and ridiculed by working and middle-class boys for every other quirk of my nature. The teachers weren't much better either. Mr. Grimm wasn't the only teacher I had difficulties with. In fact, there were one or two that I gelled with, but he made it his mission to break me. He was the swaggering, chalk-toting cowboy who would tame this angry, rearing buck into the prize winner they imagined me to be. But it wasn't to be. I did his lessons the same as all the others. At the beginning of the year, we were given textbooks and I'd read the ones that interested me cover to cover in the first few days of term. If a subject interested me, I'd seek beyond the school text and read further, which inevitably led to me having questions for my teachers. Mr. Grimm wasn't keen on answering them, though. He wanted to stick to both his curriculum and his pre-prepared lesson plans. Every time I asked a question, I buggered that up, and he wasn't very good at concealing his anger. It didn't help that he was a bit rusty on a few things, and me pointing that out on occasion went down like a lead balloon. Now, before I go any further, I can see it from his side. I've been a grown-up for a long time, and I've plenty of friends past and present who teach kids. Teaching is a hard job, and I didn't make it easy for poor old Mr. Grimm, for all his faults. But I didn't know that then, and I kind of doubt he'd have admitted he was out of his depth anyway. All I knew was that my teacher didn't like me asking questions. Then he got annoyed at me answering his questions, and eventually just started sending me out of the class to stand in the corridor if I dared so much as raise my hand. This went on for weeks until the fateful day he came out of the class to see me, sat back in the plywood chair that I put out ready before class, happily reading a paperback copy of Doctor Who and the Day of the Daleks that I'd tucked into my blazer pocket. I'd got so used to getting sent out of his lessons that I'd made the best of it and made myself comfortable. That sent him over the edge, so he grabbed me literally by the ear and marched me to the headmaster's office. That was when I was told that they now had no choice but to send me to the educational psychologist. Of course, it wasn't just because Mr. Grimm lost his rag that day, but that was the final straw. I'd been in trouble in that school since day one. I got in trouble for asking too many or too complex questions in some of my lessons, and for complete failure in others. I was constantly told not to read things that interested me in my own time because it messed up the other pupils, but I was to spend more time torturing myself attempting things I simply couldn't do. I stopped doing homework after the first couple of months because it felt like a pointless exercise. I was there to learn, and quite frankly, I wasn't doing much of it when they wouldn't answer any of my questions. I was scheduled for detention every lunchtime and after school for 3 solid months at one point, and I didn't attend once. I couldn't bear anything related to sport or competition, so I either forgot my PE kit or flat out refused to participate. I was constantly bullied by pupils and teachers alike, occasionally ganging up with each other, and nobody ever wanted to hear my side. When they started pulling out the big guns, the threat of the educational psychologist, I just thought, bring it on. This could be a chance for me to be listened to by a knowledgeable third party and get the school to fess up about their unreasonable expectations. The psychologist would let me explain what the school wouldn't listen to, and I'd be vindicated. That wasn't what happened. At least, not at first. The psychologist, Mr. Gobbler, was an older, middle-aged man with an air of hand-rolled cigarettes and a tweed jacket with worn elbows. I knew what he thought of me the moment I sat before him. This was another cowboy out to shatter any illusions of independence or free will that I might still hold. He was quite candid about his purpose. I had been deemed to be playing games with my teachers, clearly displaying superior intelligence, yet insisting on playing the fool when it suited me. He wasn't there to help me reason why I had difficulties in school and help me solve them. He was there to strip out my rebellious streak. Sadly, the closest he got for him was calling me obdurate several times and recommending the school continue with the same punishments that had failed for the last couple of years, only more of them. Or I could transfer to a special school a couple of 100 miles away, which was little more than a borstal. In short, he tried to scare me into submission. Things took an unexpected turn then. Up until now, my dad had been taking the lead in the family side of this affair, but when I came home inconsolable from my last appointment with Gobbler, convinced I was going to be sent away to some kind of prison for naughty schoolboys, my mum stepped up, and she started to fight my corner. A number of phone calls and a couple of meetings later, I was told that Gobbler had washed his hands of me, but that my remaining appointments were to be with a new, younger guy who'd recently started with them, and it was he who finally recognised what was different about me. He was fresh from qualification, just getting established in his first permanent role, and still keen as mustard on keeping up with the latest news and developments in his field. If it hadn't been for him being so fresh and so up to date, I doubt I'd have known I was autistic until decades later. Maybe I'd still be in the dark now even. This was 1984. A short while before my 14th birthday, and Lorna Wing's 1981 paper which introduced the idea of an autism spectrum was still fresh in his mind. He saw in me what he'd read about, and I suspect seen in himself too. I have a feeling now, years later, and with the benefit of a lot of hindsight, I think the risk that young man took on my diagnosis was in part motivated by his desire for personal clarity and expression. More than once, he told me how he could see himself in me as we spoke. He explained what my diagnosis of autism, Asperger type, meant before he told me family or my school. And even though I was barely a teenager and medical understanding of autism was positively Stone Age compared to now, it all made so much sense. I wasn't lazy, rude, obdurate, or any of the other unflattering judgments I'd been living with on a daily basis after all. I was autistic. And it was all normal for people like me. My diagnosis tale doesn't end there either. I've told before that I stopped telling people of my diagnosis in the early 90s after some unpleasant experiences. In my early 30s, a decade or so later, my then girlfriend told me about some teenage boys she'd met through work who had Asperger syndrome and how they reminded her of me. I eventually told her about my diagnosis, and it didn't go down terribly well. We cleared the air eventually, but it drove a wedge between us which never quite healed, which is why I'm now married to somebody different. Between us, we decided that maybe I should get a second opinion as an adult. After all, the spectrum hadn't formally been adopted at the time I was diagnosed the first time, so perhaps things would look different under the now finalised and formalised criteria. It's a long story for another day, but I don't have to tell you the result, do I? This time the language was very clear. Asperger's syndrome. It amuses me when I get the odd comment doubting who or what I am, because I'm about as diagnosed as they come. Not only was I diagnosed when I was a child, it was done all over again as an adult, and the result was the same. Times have changed, and the old Asperger thing just is old hat now. But the diagnosis was clear both times. The diagnosis I received in the 80s was based on speculative criteria, but the second time around they were fully mature and well bedded in. Since that time they've changed again, so should I seek a third one? I don't think I do, but it doesn't mean I'm resting on my laurels. We're constantly evolving as individuals throughout our lives, but there's not enough known about how autistic people age or cope with a rapidly changing world differently to our holistic and neurotypical peers as we get to different milestones in life. How can autistic people best handle relationships, breakups, grief, and all the other complications of life beyond childhood? Those of us who are over 40 and know we're autistic are blazing new paths for others to follow, whether we want to or not. The more we learn about who we are, where we've been, and ultimately where we want to go as we age in a world that's only slightly less hostile than the one we grew up in, the better our children and grandchildren will fare when they get to our ages. Our mistakes and our successes will pave the paths they will walk. That's what keeps me doing this. Along with most of my autistic generation, we went through a whole lot of crap that we wouldn't have had to if people just knew a little more about who we are and we them. If this world we all share could stop forcing everyone into convenient, predictable, controllable boxes and just roll with the simple reality of neurodiversity, we'd all be a lot happier and safer. I'm Quinn, and I guess I'm twice autistic. Thank you for watching. If you've already liked and subscribed and would like to support the channel more, then please follow the Patreon links in the description to pledge what you feel is fair and affordable to help keep the lights on here and the content keep flowing.